The 2020 U.S. presidential election is approaching. Danger ahead. The 2016 presidential election was definitely a surprise all around the world. Here in the U.S., based on the results, it was great news for at least 63 million people, and terrible news for at least 66 million people. For most on the right, it was a massive victory, while those on the left were mostly shocked by the outcome. The 2020 presidential election is now shaping up to cast major shadows over the 2016 election. Enthusiastic voters on the right mostly want to see Trump stay in office because of common belief that he has been and continues to deliver on his promises. On the other side, Democrats have taken on a whole new agenda, swinging far left into socialism, and aiming their sights on anything that will defeat Trump, whether true or false, whether right or wrong. There seems to be no limit for the extreme. The one thing everyone can agree on is that this is going to be a fight, and probably a dirty one. Let's now take a more in-depth look at some of the real, as well as manufactured issues we face for the 2020 election. First up is racism. People are constantly bombarded with accusations of someone being a racist or similar labels. And these are mostly directed at those on the right. It seems that one no longer has to explicitly use racial slurs, but rather simply perform actions that not long ago would be widely considered common sense, like border security. While not denying real acts of racism do exist, common and sensible words and actions are too often taken out of context and used to slander opponents and divide people.
Why doesn't President Trump condemn racism? His own words and actions tell you why. He's a racist.
And then another thing I'd like to say, respectfully, why are we still asking, is this guy a white supremacist? I mean, like,
to you,
it's not even the question anymore. I mean, the Muslim man, all Mexicans are rapists, murderers, drug dealers.
Specifically, when you said they're rapists, and some I assume are good people, but you don't have any regrets about that word rapist.
And some are good, and some are rapists, and some are killers, and we don't even know what we're getting.
Charlottesville, we have marching, the KKK, the alt-right, neo-Nazis, and he can't make a decision between what's right and wrong, what's love and hate. There's both people. I mean, that's gonna be behind this. I mean, that quote, that's gonna be attached to him. He's gonna be on the wrong side of history, and that's the first thing they're gonna say, that quote.
Justice will be delivered. As I said on Saturday, we condemn in the strongest possible terms this egregious display of hatred, bigotry, and violence. It has no place in America. And as I have said many times before, no matter the color of our skin, we all live under the same laws. We all salute the same great flag. And we are all made by the same Almighty God. We must love each other, show affection for each other, and unite together in condemnation of hatred, bigotry, and violence. We must rediscover the bonds of love and loyalty that bring us together as Americans. Racism is evil, and those who cause violence in its name are criminals and thugs, including the KKK, neo-Nazis, white supremacists, and other hate groups that are repugnant to everything we hold dear as Americans. We are a nation founded on the truth that all of us are created equal. We are equal in the eyes of our Creator. We are equal under the law, and we are equal under our Constitution. Those who spread violence in the name of bigotry strike at the very core of America.
If one only tries to look, it is not hard to see that this increase in racial tensions is mostly sourced in news and other media. Taking the sources, failures in context, and coordination around political events into consideration, an able mind can see a manipulation agenda. For those wondering why this is happening, the answer is power. You need to look closely at who is sowing division. You can look back into history, and you will discover how these divisions repeat. Today, the Democratic Party is experiencing a shift, further left into socialism, and President Trump and conservatives on the right are in the way. The left's only option is division. It is an old strategy which has been refined by communists many years ago.
We can and must write in a language which sows among the masses hate, revulsion, and scorn toward those who disagree with us.
A Communist Party directive issued in 1943 reads,
Members and front organizations must continually embarrass, discredit, and degrade our critics. When obstructionists become too irritating, label them as fascist or Nazi or anti-Semitic. Constantly associate those who oppose us with those names which already have a bad smell. The association will, after enough repetition, become fact in the public mind. The communists disdain to conceal their views and aims. They openly declare that their ends can only be attained by the forcible overthrow of all existing social conditions.
The most powerful enemy can be conquered only by exerting the utmost effort and by thoroughly, carefully, attentively, and skillfully taking advantage of even the smallest rift, of every antagonism of interest among the various groups or types within the various countries.
With Phase 1, that of dividing the population, completed, the revolutionists were ready to move into Phase 2 of the communist blueprint for takeover. Create the appearance of popular support. In every country now part of the Red Slave Empire, the actual number of Communist Party members at the time of takeover has been less than 1% of the total population. As Lenin phrased it,
Communism must be built with non-communist hands.
by cleverly beguiling thousands of well-intentioned people into unwittingly supporting the revolutionary program, the dedicated 1% can trick the 99% into surrendering their birthright. This they do by hiding the true communist objectives behind appealing slogans and pretended humanitarian goals. As Stalin explained,
the revolutionary accepts reform in order to use it as a cover for his illegal work.
We must not let history repeat itself, especially in our great country, which has and must continue to stand for life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. If you want to remain truly free, you must educate yourself. Research history, tactics of subversion and division, and learn the truth about all of the isms that threaten our way of life, so that you can defend yourself and your fellow citizens from being manipulated into forfeiting what America stands for. We should all respect our opponents from all political aisles, considering their points of view, then peacefully debating differences, and if that fails, we can simply agree to disagree. There is no need to raise the heat with hatred, no matter how much you disagree. No one should be silenced for their beliefs. No one should ever get assaulted for wearing a hat, no matter what is on the hat. Ultimately, we are supposed to set good examples for our children, through compromise and understanding, otherwise we will achieve nothing positive. And if you're on the left, check out the Walk Away campaign to hear real stories, from real people, who have become aware of the extremes on the left, hear people from the opposite side, and it might just change you too. Next up is election interference. we've been told that Russians were interfering in our election. That was true. However, since then, much more information has been revealed which shows that Russians were not the only ones tampering with our 2016 election. In fact, the biggest influence has come from within, from what is now called Big Tech, which includes Google, Facebook, and Twitter. Google provides results for over 34 billion searches per month. On YouTube, over 5 billion videos are watched per day. On Facebook, over 1.5 billion people are active per day. Twitter has over 69 million users in the US. These three companies, which are within miles of each other in a blue state, can easily sway elections, virtually overnight. We must seriously consider the potential abuse of power from these and similar companies. More and more information is revealed either by research or by leaks, which suggests these specific companies have manipulated both 2016 and 2018 elections, in one way or another. A few things that these companies have in common include left-leaning political stance, targeting of conservatives, an enormous amount of data on millions of voters, and the technical ability to manipulate masses of people in ways that are not easily detectable.
You said in subsequent elections, Google and Facebook and Twitter and big tech's manipulation could manipulate as many as 15 million votes in a subsequent election.
In 2020, if all these companies are supporting the same candidate, there are 15 million votes on the line that can be shifted without people's knowledge and without leaving a paper trail for authorities to trace.
Now you described the Go Vote reminder, and you said it wasn't a public service announcement, but rather manipulation. Can you explain how? I'm not sure everyone followed the details of that.
Well, sure. If on Election Day in 2016, if Mark Zuckerberg, for example, had chosen to send out a Go Vote reminder, say just to Democrats, and no one would have known if he had done this, that would have given that day an additional at least 450,000 votes to Democrats. And we know this without doubt because of Facebook's own published data, because they did an experiment that they didn't tell anyone about during the 2010 election. They published it in 2012. It had 60 million Facebook users involved. They sent out a Go Vote reminder, and they got something like 360,000 more people to get off their sofas and go vote, who otherwise would have stayed home. The point is, I don't think that Mr. Zuckerberg sent out that reminder in 2016. I think he was overconfident. I think Google was overconfident. All these companies were. I don't think he sent that out. Without monitoring systems in place, we'll never know what these companies are doing. But the point is, in 2018, I'm sure they were more aggressive. We have lots of data to support that. And in 2020, you can bet that all of these companies are going to go all out. And the methods that they're using are invisible. They're subliminal. They're more powerful than most any effects I've ever seen in the behavioral sciences. And I've been in the behavioral sciences for almost 40 years.
Technically speaking, there are literally thousands of ways these companies can influence votes with small and subtle changes to their systems. And while any loud and blatant efforts would raise alarms quickly, strategically implementing even dozens of small changes can influence millions without triggering alarms, especially if their sites are not monitored for such activity. It is also worth noting that more and more brave whistleblowers are coming out with their concerns from within these very companies. Recently, an engineer at Google leaked a batch of internal documents which are available on the Project Veritas website. The documents expose much of the inner workings of Google, their culture, their bias, and their manipulation. Among the leaked information is a screenshot of an internal system profile of one of Google's top engineers, who happens to be involved in ranking. On his profile, his written mission is less free search, not showing fake news, hate speech, conspiracy theories, or science, medical or history denial unless we're sure that's what the user wants, which begs the question, who decides what to hide, and how do they determine what the user really wants? Surprisingly, This same engineer is also openly anti-Trump, and seems to be quite radical about it. There is no question, we, the people, with or without government, must be vigilant and ensure we all do our best to protect the integrity of our elections. Not only do we risk losing our votes, but the results could lead to more division and potentially civil unrest. As you know, we face many issues in our country today, far too many to cover in this video. For now, we will cover one more issue, arguably one of the most important, and that is the current shift of the Democratic Party into democratic socialism. The first thing to understand is that democratic socialism has no real record to prove it could be successful, especially in a nation as diverse as the United States of America. The increased reference of the term can be attributed to Bernie Sanders, and more recently to Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez and Rashida Tlaib, all of whom are backed by the Democratic Socialists of America. The DSA is an organization with origins dating back to the early 70s, and is heavily involved in politics, elections, and activism, with a heavy focus on recruiting young students from all over the country. And while many are recruited with great-sounding goals and missions, the organization itself is only growing and pushing their own agenda of transforming this nation into a socialist state. And if we look at a recent survey, we find that 52% of millennials would prefer to live in a socialist or communist country, while 72% of older Americans prefer a capitalist country. This is not surprising, given that 1 in 4 Americans have not received any education about communism, and most people are also ill-informed about socialism. We can likely attribute these unfortunate facts to political messages, and to the fact that most professors are left-leaning liberals or progressives, at a ratio of 12-to-1 versus conservatives, an imbalance that should concern us all.
Last year, some millennials were feeling the burn in hopes of getting everything for free under socialism, but it seems some students can't even define what socialism is.
What is more alarming than millions of gullible or uneducated voters, who are falling for promises that cannot be fulfilled, is that the DSA has roots tied to communist groups and agendas, which have been operating in the country for many decades, slowly working to destroy our way of life, all from within.
Khrushchev, as for Lenin, Stalin, Mao Zedong, and Castro, and as it must be for all communists, words are one thing, actions another. The communist conspiracy is a deliberate and predictable plan of action to subvert the world. A startling story from Lenin in 1914 with 13 followers to the present with 1 billion people under the control of a comparative handful of communists. In the Soviet Union itself, only 5% of the people are members of the party. A communist philosophy that the end justifies the means has caused pain out of all proportion to the pitiful social progress communism has achieved. And yet it has spread at a fantastic speed and demonstrated a frightening vitality. Why? 2 primary reasons, I think. First, it has duped well-meaning people everywhere into thinking that it provided an answer to the economic and social problems of the world. Second, it has not hesitated to use force wherever possible to impose itself on unwilling people and to hold them in abject subjugation. What can we do in the face of this communist threat? Well, for one thing, we can, by example, let the people of the world know that the way of free men provides a surer, happier answer for their problems and the outdated, coercive doctrines of Karl Marx. That freedom, and not communism, is the doctrine of the future. We must remain strong so that we can never be blackmailed by men like Khrushchev and Mao Zedong, and so that we can uphold the hopes of the captive peoples. If, as the communists say over and over again, war is inevitable, then it is sheer folly for us not to make every conceivable political, economic, military, and psychological preparation to win. As I said at the beginning of our picture, no one knows what the end of the story will be. That's up to you.